It's roll call.
Oh, sure.
I don't have you as coding.
Probably still.
It didn't pop up when I signed up.
Right, because she wasn't.
We gotta hang around.
You were so early.
So
Did you press save? Because if you didn't press save.
Thank you.
Now it's.
No.
We're good? Prerequisite. Okay.
Oh, wait, it's on recording.
We're recording?
Yep.
Okay. Good. All right. Chair Gary Delvo. Here. Vice Chair Matt Schuler.
Here.
Alderperson Barbara Dorr.
Here.
Jim Blumreich. Here. Debbie Dean.
Here.
And Kathy Hinkvist and Melanie Parma has to be excused.
Okay, motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Jim and Matt, all those in favor, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. Regular business, number one, consideration of possible action on communications from Alderman Johnson, District 9, to create a policy guaranteeing city council oversight and disbursements of funds related to affordable housing extension resolutions for TIDs 7, 8, and 12.
Yes. So this is communication I erred on, did not get on the last agenda, so I just wanted to start the process. As you know, we talked about the affordable housing extensions for those 3 tax increment districts. We talked about it at council, had actually a very good discussion about it. But there was decided from Alder Johnson, he wanted a communication about just how we're going to spend these funds. We're not anticipating them coming in until 2021, 2022, but wanted some guidance in terms of how we're going to look at allocating these funds. There's some rules on it. 70% has to be spent on affordable housing. So our recommendation is to send this to staff. We feel this really aligns a lot of stuff we're working on right now. We have to update a consolidated block grant plan. We're doing a housing study as part of that. We're starting working on a comp plan. So give us kind of 6 months to work a few of those things out and then come back and report in March 2020.
I just want to know, is this necessary? Is this something that other municipalities do? It just seems like.
Yeah, they could. What I look at it is, and maybe how we would structure it is, this body or our staff works on like a block grant plan, right? We get a certain allocation of block grant funds, and here's our plan of how we're going to spend it. We have a public hearing and bring public input. Then we present a budget to you, and then gets approved by council. After that, then everything is just run through RDA. So in terms of, right, here's kind of the master plan, and as projects come through, this body approves it. I think we would maybe look at doing the same type of thing. For council, again, neighborhood enhancement is another example. They approve kind of the overall budget categories, policy in terms of where we're going, but then it's this body who really works on the specific projects, allocating funds for each particular project.
So in the past, has it just been the body that makes that determination? Or hasn't this ever happened in the past?
We've never had this source of funding before.
We've never had this source of funding? Okay.
But
So-
that's how it works for block grant and enhancement. We
Okay.
set the programs up and then run it through the redevelopment. Doesn't go back to council.
Can I comment? Are you asking about, have other communities created this type of housing?
No. I'm asking if other communities require their city council to have the oversight on the disbursement of the funds. I wasn't sure why that was necessary.
Anyway, the bottom line, when you send the staff and flush it out and come back with a recommendation.
Yes, in March of 2020.
Motion, please.
Motion.
Motion by Jim,
Second.
second by Matt. Any questions or comments? If not, I think we'll go on this one. Yeah, we will.
Passed unanimously.
Very good, thank you. Good comments. Number two, consideration of possible action on development agreements 19-04 with TWG Development LLC and DDL Holdings LLC for TWG2 at the Railroad Yard, 419 Down Driver Way, tax parcel 5-1772. Yes. please.
All right. I appreciate, again, everyone taking time for this special meeting today. We've been working, as you know, with TWG, one project over at the rail yard, Broadway Lofts, which go up Broadway. You can see it coming out of the ground now, which is really great to see. As we talked about Broadway Lofts, at the same time, we also talked with their team about another project in the community, market rate project, and looked at some different sites and explored a few different alternatives, and over time really came to the conclusion that the rail yard was the place to be in terms of just the development that's going on and the amenities, but also for TWG, just a really good synergy with the project that they have there. And so what we're having before you today is a proposal for a development agreement for a pretty substantial project, multifamily project. All in, it'll be 225 units. And this will be at the south, or I guess the northeast corner of Broadway and Kellogg. So this will be a focal point coming into the rail yard. One of the things that we discussed in terms of the overall master planning of the rail yard, we wanted something on Broadway and Kellogg that was going to match the size and scale of the warehouses that are there, and really make sure we had a great entrance to that property. And so in terms of the residential product, we've been talking a lot about how we're behind on production of housing units, and this fits into our view of what we need in terms of bringing additional units and bringing in that additional price points and rents that really provide opportunities for all members of our community to have housing options there. So what we have representatives from the developer who are here today. Michael Taft and JB Curry, who can speak a little bit more about the project. In short, we can go through if you want to hear about the project first, and then we can talk a little bit more about the incentives. We're proposing a multi-part incentive, kind of like we did with the Broadway Lofts project, whereas with the original rail yard agreement, we would provide some funding up front to DDL to help with the infrastructure build-out. I know Mr. Schuler had asked me some questions, so I'll be prepared to kind of talk about how that flows. Yes, I know, give me a heads up ahead of time to prepare, so appreciate it, right?
I just wondered who Mr. Schuler was.
Right, oh.
I don't know him.
And so we'll look at how that flows, and then after that service is paid on that, the increment will be divided up as a pay-go. As you know, some goes to DDL. They've agreed to give a portion to the developer, and then here today they're asking for a portion of the city's increment that's left over after the debt service. So we can go through and kind of crunch the numbers. I got some sheets so we can see how that flows.
Good.
But I think to start off, maybe it would be appropriate. If it's appropriate. To open the floor, let the developer talk a little bit more about the project and why we're really excited about it.
Okay, move to open the floor.
Second.
Motion by Overdorf and second by Jim to open the floor. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried.
All right. So I'm going to get this up on the screen. Do you want to turn that on? Do you have a laptop or do you want to run it off here?
Off there would be great, but I also have a laptop.
We'll run it off just over there. And it's version 2, correct?
It is.
Okay.
Good.
Right, it's like first time using a computer, huh? Yep. Okay, great. Turn it on, be helpful. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. So thanks again for everybody coming to a special RDA meeting. I appreciate your flexibility here. I'm here with TWG Development, which is, as you know, a national multifamily developer out of Indianapolis. I'm a development analyst with the company here as well with JB Curry, our VP of Market Rate Development. Just for a quick background, have over 75 projects either done or under construction, founded a little over a decade ago, all over the Midwest and starting to reach into more states. We're full service, so we do development, take it through financing and find equity and debt. We manage all the design in-house with 5 in-house architects and an interior designer. we have a GC arm for the construction, and then we manage and own our own properties. And then we focus on the full income spectrum, kind of based on what the demands are in any given market. So just to give some context for our site, this is a little bit of an outdated aerial. But we're there on North Broadway. I think this is a little bit closer to what it looks like today. But as you know, as it was covered, it's part of the Rail Yard Master Development, where Broadway Lofts is right here, just to the right of Bond Street. That is under construction. This is actually, I pulled these from a recent update, and it looks very similar today. I think the rain has not been great, but the framing is getting going, and I think everything has managed to stay on schedule, even though we've had record rains, I think.
Yeah.
And so we're really happy with that project, just in construction, and we're really excited to see it finished out. Looking specifically to this project, we're looking on the south end of the 400 block. It's about 3 acres, and right there between the 2 historic buildings. So if you were looking, kind of walking north along Broadway, the view that you were kind of imagining as you approach the project would be something like this. So this is a 5-story building, balconies on all units, primarily masonry and glass facade. We really appreciated kind of the zoning ordinance, the PUD that was put together for the rail yard is very intentional about encouraging pedestrian walkability and good masonry materials, and just enhancing kind of the vibrancy and the livability of this district. So we think that we can really capture it with this kind of building, and it fits almost perfectly kind of what it calls for in that zoning plan. If you were to turn right on Kellogg and kind of continue there, I saw that they actually just poured the curbs for Kellogg, if you head over there today, or in the last couple of days. But this would be kind of the view looking back toward Broadway on Kellogg. So again, you can see really great looking facade that we think is going to look even better after we kind of tweak it through even more architectural process over the next couple months. You can see roof deck that would kind of have a hosting kitchen, like a premium kitchen right off of the roof deck, where you could put together a big meal and have friends over and kind of have that roof deck indoor-outdoor space. And then as well, kind of that storefront extending down the sidewalk, and then this pedestrian connector that would kind of enhance the permeability of the building. We don't want it to be this huge, like monotonous, massive building that feels like a mega development. So we kind of added in this pedestrian connector that makes it feel more natural to connect to Elmore Commons and more of the northern side of the park. Here's a quick overview of the site plan. You can see that we have 7,000 square feet of residential. And then kind of that storefront feel continues, but it is increasingly kind of private into community amenities and a leasing office. And then as you kind of wrap around into this interior courtyard, you have more residential and parking. Just a few reference images. This is a project we recently completed in Indianapolis. This would have our premium finishes in all the units. We do granite countertops, stainless appliances, kind of designer lighting. We have premium flooring, 9-foot ceiling heights. You can see a doorway out to the balcony on every unit. So these can be pretty great units. The amenity space, we always have a 24-hour fitness center with pretty great equipment. I kind of wish I lived in one of our buildings. And then kind of the general amenity space, increasingly we kind of see residents looking for almost a co-working feel. Sometimes, quite often actually, they are able to work from home or have various kinds of kind of gig economy jobs and that sort of thing. So we want it to be a space where they can gather with friends, but also get some work done during the day. So it's free coffee, fast Wi-Fi, and just kind of a good space to gather. And then this is kind of a reference for just a rooftop we recently completed in Indianapolis, right next to our headquarters. In terms of who this development would be serving, I kind of put this together, this spectrum of incomes, to give you some context in terms of Broadway Lofts, which is currently under construction there in the rail yard, primarily serves kind of the spectrum from extremely low income to 60% of income. And so I threw kind of the average incomes at those points on there to give you some context. And we think that's extremely important. I mean, if you're opening businesses in the rail yard district, encouraging kind of a vibrant neighborhood, you need service level employees. And as you increase vibrancy, cost of housing goes up. And so you want to really make a great neighborhood, but not price out those same service workers that are really enabling the neighborhood to be successful. So we think that's super important. However, if you're only going up to 60% of income, I mean, this is really half of the chart. If this is average income, you have this other half still left. So you have 70% of the population that cannot live in Broadway lofts. And so we were looking at how do we serve more of this income spectrum. So this development would feature primarily average income and up units, as well as 10% of the units would be at 60% income or less. So I think we're adding a lot of those valuable affordability and without tax credits. But we're primarily kind of aiming for the rest of this 50% of the spectrum. And then you can see that kind of broken down here more specifically. An interesting nuance, the way that we're financing it, and this is a little bit confusing, but I'm happy to explain it more, is that 80% of the units are limited to 100% average rents, but they are not income limited. So anybody can use one of those units and actually just gets a really healthy limit to their, what rent they might be subject to. So you can kind of see the difference there in this market 2-bedroom versus 100% 2-bedroom, where for that particular unit, there's about a $500 delta. In terms of the others, you can kind of see studios and 1-bedrooms, essentially market rate rent. I mean, those are about the highest rents that you'll pay in Green Bay, along kind of next to the metro development. And then, but we also have those 60% and kind of those discounted 2-bedrooms. But overall, again, these are all premium units, all granite countertops. You could walk into any given one and not have no idea what income level it might have. And primarily, these are going to be fairly high-income residents that would be living here. And then you can kind of see a few other amenities we throw in there. We generally have dog parks and a nice indoor tub for like washing your dog, and grilling station up on the rooftop, and indoor bike storage. We find bikeability is increasingly important for residents. Adding features like that, repair equipment for those bikes. I mean, if you're not a homeowner, it's hard to have that equipment around. And yeah, in terms of costs, we're projecting this currently at about $45 million for total development cost. We're paying for that via 21% equity, the rest of it debt. And then we're projecting the tax liability of the project to really increase over tenfold. So while the proposed incentive that I think Kevin will dig into a little bit more detail, the city is still obtaining taxes from that project, and I think we'll ultimately, especially at the end of the period, see a huge benefit for those increase in taxes. So I think overall, I guess, and to hit the schedule really quickly, we plan on purchasing this before the end of the year to actually maximize our opportunity zone. This is an opportunity zone, if you're familiar with that mechanism. And if we purchase it by the end of the year, it maximizes kind of the benefits of that investment. So we're planning on purchasing the land this year, starting construction in the summer, finishing construction 2 years later in the summer, and then spending about 1.5 years leasing up. So overall, I think it's a really great development. I guess I'll head back to the site plan. And I think it adds needed housing density. I was just reading that there's I think in the last decade, there's been a 4% increase in the percent of households that are renters. So increasingly, if Green Bay wants more residents, the housing base of the city is going to have to shift toward renting. So there's this huge demand for premium renting, and you see it in apartment buildings like Metro and CDAC that are full. I mean, if somebody gets a new startup job and wants to live in downtown Green Bay, they can't if they're kind of looking at that sort of apartment. So we think this is a really needed housing project. We were really happy that it can provide affordable housing, but it can also provide market rate housing. And yeah, I think after that, open up to any questions or to Kevin's guidance.
Yeah, appreciate the summary. I think, Michael really captured it well. Two big things that really attracted us to this project and getting it to this point. One has to do with the attention to design, really feeling this is the appropriate scale and density that's needed, in the rail yard. And for that particular site, both, we talked about it with our planners and working on the PUD. And in terms of just, massing, it really fits in, I think, well with what is going on there. And it's really going to, as we've always tried to say, create an additional neighborhood in that whole district. And I think they've been really great to work with in terms of, conforming to the PUD that's there. That really does talk about, density and scale and design. It's really important. You got one shot a generation to get it right. So in terms of, the masonry and the glass, it's really important, to continue those things in the new structures that we're building there. And then the second piece, it just goes to the product itself and just really the diversity, of targeting additional segments of the market. In terms of, again, sometimes that I talked about that, maybe gap in the middle where we work, a lot of times with LMI households, and then, kind of the high end, but, kind of made in that middle, right around AMI, that 80 to 120% sometimes gets forgotten about. And look, we're not alone in that, but, to have a product that offers, rents in those ranges. And also, again, captures, we've talked about again too, the changing household demographics, and then really helps us take advantage of that demand in the marketplace. So that's, with that, again, we can talk a little bit more about incentives if you have questions, or you can ask for the developer himself.
I guess, Kevin, I got a couple of basic questions. In the development agreement, the guaranteed development is 30 million?
The guarantee development will be 21 million. They're looking at about guaranteeing 30 million in hard costs for construction.
Okay, so, but on tax base, it's not 21 million. Is that what we're talking about, the tax
Yep.
base?
I think assessed value. is
Yes.
stated in here is 21.
Correct.
Okay.
And we're looking at what page?
On the 21.
No, the 21, should be what we're estimating the assessment will be at. I think, again, working with their assessor, it's probably a conservative number.
Especially when we're talking 44 million in development costs?
Right, so again, here, one of the challenges as we looked at, working with their assessor, I think it'll come out higher than 21. Part of it is just construction costs are just way higher than they've been before. And at the end of the day, you can only still charge even the market rate rents, a certain amount of rent. It's gonna get ticked down a little bit because there's 10%, that'll be at that 60%, so those rents will bring it down a little bit further.
Right, okay.
And there's some uncertainty right now, just the retail component of it. So we really didn't rely a whole lot on how that retail space will be rented out. So yeah, in terms of, we feel in terms of the assessment where it's projected, it fits. It'll probably be higher, but I think in terms of also, when we talk about the debt service, we want to be a little conservative on that side. In case it does come in, at 21, that's still enough then to cover our costs for the debt service, and making sure we're not making an error there.
So the bottom line, the city would be investing 2.1 million upfront?
Correct. I put out, Mr. Schuler requested.
This is the real answer here. Look at Jim get all excited.
Right, it's on a spreadsheet, I know, right?
Yeah.
I had a print ledger so you could read it. I thought about putting it on the screen, but it's a little bit small. So in short, and we might, depending on time of completion and then lease up, some of these might shift about a year, but, so if we go in with assessed value of 21 million, with that we're creating about 19.5 of increment. The $2.1 million loan goes back to the original agreement with the rail yard. When we go back to talking about development of the rail yard, We estimated, and this was internally our Public Works Department, that infrastructure for the rail yard, the streets, the sanitary, water, sanitary, stormwater, lighting, everything that was needed to service that area was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.5 to $5.5 million. That was 2015, so as you know, right, construction prices have creeped up a little
Yes.
bit. But the way we negotiated the original agreement with DDL is that we would provide them funding to build this infrastructure as projects came online to help service
Yeah.
as things got built out.
Yes.
So the 2.1 million is based on, we said, for every $1 million of increment you're going to create, we'll provide $100,000 towards the infrastructure. So then, you would say we have a loan then of 2.1 million that would go in, and then after the debt services is taken out on that, and here we just projected a 15-year note at 5%. After the debt service is taken out, it takes a few years to kind of catch up in terms of, right, because we're taking out the debt right away. But it's a few years until the building is built and actually producing property taxes. But once we catch up, then the extra increment, the available increment is split 50-50 between DDL and the city. And really what that was designed to do is to help out with some of the build-out costs. You know, especially the rehab of the warehouses or the construction, I mean, much like other development in the community, right? The rents aren't keeping up with the construction increases. And so you also have historical buildings that need rehab and a lot of work. So the PAYGO was designed then to help with some of those more private development costs. And in the case here, DDL has agreed to share part of those costs with this developer, the new development, in terms of moving that piece forward. What's been requested of us then is after it's split 50-50, from our share is to take 60% of our share, 60% and 50%, so 30% really, and go towards as well in terms of, again, helping with some of their build-out costs. And so with that, it all adds up basically, the PAYGO ends up being about 80%. So if you take 50% to DDL plus 30%, 60% of our 50% is 30%. So in essence, 80% is going to development projects, 20% is going back into the TID balance.
Right.
And so that's where the numbers come across here. So with that, you know, probably in somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3 million, 3.1 million of PAYGO that's to be divvied up between DDL and TWG, but then about 760,000 for the TID balance.
And that requires an extension, right? 3-year extension on the TID?
Yes, so we talked about this at the Joint Review Board. They decided, we did a request because the Broadway Lofts project anticipated the same thing. They felt it was too early to decide to grant an extension, so they actually held the item. Kind of gave them a hint that there might be another project coming through that was going to be requesting this. What we did though is we said, look, if it's not extended to 3 years, that we would provide an incentive equivalent to an additional 3 years. So with that, it would end up being, if you look at the net PAYGO, probably around $650,000, which if for some reason they didn't grant the extension, we had to close, there's still enough in our balance to make that happen. And I think the JRB was saying, let's see what happens till we get closer to closure time, because if this keeps going like it is going, there could be a surplus in the fund, and we don't need to extend it. We could just, like we've done some other TIDs that we've closed, we can just escrow the money and close it on time. And so that's why they don't want to say no, but they also don't want to say yes yet, because we are still, quite some time out from that closure. So there's language in the agreement that anticipates this, but there's a mechanism, if it doesn't happen, that they can still look at that incentive.
We're right now, this TID is due to be retired at 2033, is that correct?
Correct.
But you're saying it might be extended?
Correct, for 3 years, which would just be a standard extension.
Okay. The 2.1 million that we'll be paying up front, is that also being paid up front? In other words, is that going to be covered before any of the splits are done? Is that 2.1 million we can pay up front?
Correct, and that goes back to the agreement that we had with DDL.
Yes.
For the rail yard north portion. So it would be taken out, I don't know, we've been working I apologize, my throat's just killing me today, so. We've been doing a lot of the upfront money with cash flow in this case. Depending on how we all look at it, for Moody's and a rating, we may get to the point, this is a pretty big amount, where we may actually look to borrow for this piece to help with that infrastructure.
But that borrowing and that payment is gonna get paid before we do the splits.
It'll get paid, I guess, kind of on a year-by-year basis. So what we do is, and that's what the account of debt service is, we estimate here's our debt service payment every year. So we're going to start paying, we're going to start going in the hole because there's nothing there yet.
Yes.
And so once the project is online, all that increment is going to go into paying the debt service until we're basically caught up and ahead.
All right.
And then once we're ahead, every year, we'll look at, all right, our debt service is just under $200,000, or let's just say there's $455,000 of increment, but our debt service is only $200,000. So once we're caught up, pay the debt service off, and then split the $250 and work on it that way.
But at 2036 at the latest, we begin full tax base.
Yes, correct.
That's only 15 years, I mean, it's only 17 years.
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Jim, do you understand, Jim? Matt, you must have questions.
Yeah, Mike, so just going to, so this 2.1 million that goes to DDL, what is that paying for?
So in their agreement, I was just going to pull up, their project cost, it first has to be spent on infrastructure, basically any type of public goods. And the way we think we structure that is, look, if we're putting money in up front, we want it going to something that would be of value to the city. In the case that things went sideways, there would at least be an asset there that would be tangible to us.
Right.
It doesn't help us to have and have finished building if that's going there first.
Right.
So the money has to go into a public infrastructure, things that will ultimately be dedicated for the public. Then after that, it can go into environmental remediation and asbestos removal. Again, we felt those are things that we would have to do if we ended up acquiring the property or working with another developer. And then after that, it can go into private side improvements. But based on the budget that's there, we're not there in terms of paying for all the public infrastructure yet. So we're still, in terms of priority, that money is going into what you see over there right now, stormwater pond, streets, all of that infrastructure.
Got it.
And these costs really are more traditional TIF, what I mean by that is that.
Yeah, it's
infrastructure.
It's
more
the,
traditional.
they call it like the classic
Yeah.
TIF, is that,
Yes.
money goes into doing it. There's a little bit of a twist in that we are, in this case, instead of us, the city, going out and doing the project, we're having the developer do it. Feeling that they, in combination with some of the private projects, can get a better cost in terms of getting it done. And what we do, I guess the other twist from the classic is we just don't give $2.1 million. We actually just reimburse costs. So they submit to us a list of all their expenses. Diane and I go through and basically then reimburse those costs as they become accumulated.
And as far as you're concerned, there's a clear understanding as far as what type of costs we're talking about.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's a list that I know Attorney Chavez and I, that was one of the things we worked through in the agreement back in 2017 when we put that together in terms of, it's got to be spent on the infrastructure first. And I think as we've looked at it, both Director Ellenbecker and I have seen the first ones go to basically the design, the engineering for all the infrastructure. And now we're in this point of, we're paying for hard costs in terms of the actual, our bills are to Peters and Martell and those things of actually getting the public infrastructure in.
And then when, hey, this project gets completed, we're assuming, right, incremental taxes are flowing. Hey, the first part of it, right, flows to service the debt. And then I'm just trying to sit here and kind of think through, so for every $100 then of incremental taxes that are created, it looks like 20 are going to DDL, 60 go to TWG, and then the last 20 go to the city.
Correct.
Okay. That was just the part in the way the agreement was written that I was struggling to make sure that I understood.
It was
But that's clear then.
But the
Designed
bottom
to be a
line, once
math
the TID is closed, all the tax.
Then it all flows, yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So this is really hybrid funding of the TIF.
in the sense that you're having some upfront, but basically all public construction for the 2.1, and then a guarantee in the form of a pay-go reimbursement back to the developer if the development reaches the level.
Correct. Correct. One of the things we discussed early on with this tax increment district in terms of the infrastructure of should it be levy funded or should it be tax increment funded? In terms of what are the benefits in terms of the streets and things in there, came to the conclusion, but for development in there, we don't need to provide infrastructure.
Right.
And so there's an alternative, and we did discuss, having a private development like a large apartment complex and having all private infrastructure back there. But, through discussions with DDL and the city, felt it was of best interest to have public infrastructure in there. And so that's what kind of generated this model.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely butt forward.
Yes.
And in the case the property were to assess more than 21 million, is there a cap on how much TIF funding we could pay out? Let's just assume it assessed really high, 30 million.
Sure. In this case, we did not. It would not change the upfront. The upfront would stay at 2.1. We feel that's just something that us, developer, assessor can at least be comfortable with in terms of finance director in terms of withdrawing funds, borrowing funds. In this one, the only cap is that they would have to show eligible expenses. So in terms of what they're requesting the additional funds for, there is not a back cap. In a way, we've done some other agreements without a cap, really as an incentive to do higher end finishes or to do things that are going to assess higher. But they would still have to demonstrate to us what those extra funds are going into.
And then they have to comply with TIF funding requirements.
Okay. Yeah, so as long as they can show additional eligible expenses, the pay go on the back end could be higher. But yes, they have to demonstrate what it's for.
Okay, the spreadsheet helps a lot. I personally, I'm not sure we need to go into closed session. I think you answer our questions, but it gives up the group if you have some questions that you want to ask in confidentiality, do it. If not, we won't. Personally, I don't think it's necessary, but it's up to you. Any other questions in open session? Any questions from the audience? Open session. Sir? If not, we'll go back to regular order business.
So moved.
Second?
Jim and Alder, first and second. All those in favor, saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're back to regular order business. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This helped a lot. I had several questions. You answered them very well. Especially helped.
Yeah, it's complicated in terms of the flows, but I think this just helps to kind of illustrate. And again, this is something we've, as a development team, discussed. Money in upfront should go to things that, if projects go sideways, there's still some type of tangible asset or value to the city.
Right.
And after that, we can work on private side construction.
We obviously, we always like total pay goes, and there's one for one up front with the developer. But since this is going through infrastructure, which is really a development of the city, I think it's a good upfront investment as compared to sometimes.
Correct.
I kind of liken this to I-43 Business Park. We started that development before we created the TIF district, and yet there was a lot of public infrastructure that needed to happen to incent the development. And so we created that TIF and used it to pay for that public infrastructure that supported additional expansion of all those businesses out there. So I see that 2.1 million very similar to I-43. And I'm a big fan of pay-go. I mean, if you don't do the development, you don't get the incentive.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, it's a big chunk of money to pay out in terms of the 80%, but you know you're going to get the 20%.
Well, and again, I think we also look a little bit long term, that sometimes not having that cap to push it higher, that when this is done in 2033, 2036, I think our goal is when we have a tax increment district, it's not to take it from 0 to 10, it's to take it from 0 to 100. And so if we can get more development in during that short time period, that's kind of our horizon that we're looking
Absolutely.
at.
And one thing struck my ears from Michael's presentation. They own their projects
Correct.
and they manage. And that was big to us on their first development.
All right, any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Alder Dorf, motion to approve, a second by Jim. Any other questions or comments? If not, we shall vote.
My screen.
Use it under.
It's coming.
Taylor?
Just taking.
Click that one, the votes on
The
that one.
vote?
Yeah, see?
It's coming.
Yeah. and then there it is.
Thank you for the assistance.
God, I've become a tacky high.
You're right.
Past unanimously.
Very good, congratulations, good luck.
Nice project.
Full speed ahead, absolutely. Number 3, consideration of possible action on lease agreement with Ultra Plating Corporation at 345 South Pearl Street, tax parcel 3-552, regarding leased land at 239 Orange Street and 119 Bridge Street, tax parcels 3-551 and 3-556. Please.
Yes, all right, so we have an older agreement with Ultra Plating Corporation to use some of our land to park their vehicles on. As you know, as we start to move forward with the shipyard, we're starting to move dirt and property lines are tight. And we don't know if there's enough room to accommodate some of those vehicles with, our needs to move dirt for filling and grading in that area. As you know, we've got to bring that out about 4 feet in elevation to get it out of the floodplain. And so, just
Is there
based on.
flooding over there?
What's that?
Is there flooding over there? I noticed it when I drive by.
No, you're like, right, all this extra water in front, right? With that, there's some provisions in here, and just, looking through, this is before my time, I know Chair Schuler was here and talked about it. And so we'd really like to kind of talk through some of those provisions and I guess next steps in terms of what we do with this agreement and how it fits into the shipyard. So since we are going to potentially be talking about negotiating some things, I think it would be appropriate to do that in closed session.
Move to convene a closed session.
Motion by Alder Dorf,
Second.
second by Matt.
Do you want me to read those?
Yes, please.
Yes.
The authority may convene in closed session pursuant to section 19.85, sub 1, sub E, Wisconsin statutes for purposes of deliberating or negotiating the sale of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business as necessary for competitive or bargaining reasons. The authority may thereafter reconvene in open session pursuant to section 19.85, sub 2, Wisconsin statutes, to report the results of the closed session and consider the balance of the agenda.
All right. Chair Gary Galvo.
Yes.
Chair Matt Schuler.
Here.
Other person Margaret Dorf.
Yes.
Jim Blumerich.
Yes.
Deputy Hayes. Okay. So we are closed.
Closed session.
Why are you telling me?
In closed session,
hostage.
in closed session, we talked about the lease agreement with
recorded.
Ultra Plating Corporation, and we came to a conclusion. I think we're ready for a motion.
It's usually blue.
Yeah, and
It's
I
not
will
recording.
make a motion that we would
It doesn't
terminate
raise.
the lease for the parcels that are currently being leased to Ultra Plating Corporation.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Matt and a second by Alder Dorf. We're going to terminate the lease with Ultra Plating. And we shall vote. Oh, first of all, any comments or questions to that motion and second? If not, we shall vote.
I must. I never do.
Have a vote second in the motion.
This vote, yes, yeah, yes.
It's passed unanimously.
Very good. Our next meeting is
Regular meeting on the
Deanna, are you going to be ready to put the recap on our bond?
I will try.
It's in November or December.
Okay, November, December? Okay,
Yep.
that's fair.
Yep.
Whichever's more convenient, but we need to have the information. from
Yes.
that. Yep. Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Matt and Jim, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Excellent job, guys.
Again, thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Other door by 5 minutes, and then we gotta hear hi too.